Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. We have a few things to cover in this video, some interesting things. This popped up on church news today. A first for the Church of Jesus Christ, 3 temples to be dedicated on same day, Sunday, September 17th. Interesting number. We're going to talk about that in more detail. I already knew that this was going to happen, but it's interesting that they're coming out with this article, and we're going to discuss some of the particulars about this. Also, rare September rainstorm arrives in Israel. So this is interesting. I first saw this on Israel 365. Blessing or curse, Israel hit by unseasonal rains as Jews prepare for New Year. Yeah, because Rosh Hashanah is coming up in just a little bit. And this is happening just before Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, on the Hebrew calendar. We're going to take a look at Google Earth. I have gone ahead and I put all the temples on here. I thought that'd be a good idea. It's taken me 2 years, but I finally worked up to the point where I'm putting all this stuff on Google Earth and I have all these spreadsheets, and it's just like things keep getting better and better as time goes on. And then I have another bit of news, but before I get into that, here is the update on the Flood the Earth Challenge. It has not been updated since the last video, but we're at 6,532 copies of the Book of Mormon that have been shared. And we've had 8 new people join the challenge, which is the most since, we had August 30th, but before that, you have to go all the way back. I think it was March. Yeah, March 28th. So it's been quite a surge in new people joining the challenge. If you haven't already considered doing so, use the Gospel Library app. There's a share button when you go to Scriptures for the Book of Mormon app that you can text or email or direct message to your friends, or you can just do it the regular way with a hard copy. Let me know in the comments of any video. Make sure to use #flood right here, or just the word flood, because then I can search the comments and quickly find your comment, or send me an email and make sure to include #flood in the subject line. Okay, so before we get into the temples and before we start talking about Israel, as I was doing the last video, I happened upon this. It turns out that we have a new location that's had its largest wildfire in its history. And the location is Nova Scotia in Canada. The name of the fire is the Barrington Lake Fire. Almost 57,000 acres and 210 buildings destroyed. So that joins several others this year. Excuse me. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 places that have had their largest or deadliest wildfires this year. For Hawaii, they had their deadliest wildfire. It was the fire that went through Lahaina, and we did several videos about that. Last I checked, the death toll is still at 115. A lot more buildings were destroyed. That's what made most of the news, was just how destructive it was. It essentially destroyed the whole town. But so this is the list of countries and states and provinces this year that have had their largest or deadliest wildfires in their recorded history. British Columbia, and then all of Canada. Canada is having its worst wildfire season this year. Hawaii had its deadliest. Greece had its largest wildfire in recorded history. And because Greece is part of the European Union, it just so happens that it's also the European Union's largest wildfire in recorded history. And then recently, I did the video where I mentioned that Louisiana had its largest wildfire, the Tiger Island Fire. And now I'm just finding out about Nova Scotia, the Barrington Lake Fire. There may be more that I don't know of. If you do, send me an email or put it in the comments. But I just want to remind you, if you haven't, or I want to let you know if you haven't seen this. So this spreadsheet tracks the largest or most destructive or deadliest, sometimes a combination of those things. And all this has happened. Everything that I have on here since 2004, starting with Alaska. This is a lot. Wildfires are getting crazy. They're getting crazy. They're becoming more frequent. They're really big. They're hitting really big areas such as Canada, right? Last I checked on August 23rd, it was at 37 million acres. I can get rid of this one. And then just a couple years before, Russia had a very large or a very bad wildfire season with 44 million, almost 45. California with 4.3. These are really large areas. Australia, the Gospers Mountain Fire, 1.2 million. So a lot is burning, and I'm sure that I'm going to add more onto this. Either discover ones that I didn't know of, or new ones will happen in the future. But if this isn't a sign of the times, I don't know what is. One thing that I do want to do with this spreadsheet, and I got some feedback, and some people were agreeing with me that I should make a column to keep track which one of these are arson, because as you know, the popular narrative in the news and in society is that this is all because of climate change. We're doing this to ourselves by driving cars too much and other things. But as I've been looking at these wildfires, there's been a lot of them in the news that were started because of arson. And I can't remember, but I think that might be the case with this Louisiana fire. So I'll make a column so we can track just how many of these are due to arson. All right. So there's my update on wildfires. Nova Scotia, the latest one to join the list. All right, now let's go over here to church news. A first for the Church of Jesus Christ. 3 temples to be dedicated on same day, Sunday, September 17th. There's Elder Bednar. He's going to do the Bentonville, Arkansas temple right there. Okay, Brasilia, Brazil, Bentonville, Arkansas, Moses Lake, Washington. The three cities are about as different as diverse as can be. Okay, what? The 3 cities are about as different and diverse as can be. Let's see. But the 3 cities, or more specifically, the houses of the Lord found in each, will be forever linked and underscored in the records of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That's because the Brazil temple and the Bentonville, Arkansas temple and the Moses Lake, Washington temple will be dedicated on the same day, Sunday, September 17th, in 2 dedicatory sessions at each site, with a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles presiding. Here's the Brazil temple. We've talked about this before when all we had was just a rendering of what it was going to look like. And the interesting thing about this, okay, let's go to the map first. Let's first visualize where all these are going to be. Let me turn on the borders. Okay, so Arkansas is going to have its first temple, but it's in the very northwest of the state. So basically it'll be serving this whole area. I suppose Tulsa, Oklahoma is probably going to, I don't know, it looks pretty much halfway between Oklahoma City and Bentonville, maybe a little bit closer to Bentonville. But anyway, Arkansas is going to have its first temple once this temple is dedicated. And then up here in Washington State, you have the Moses Lake Temple, which is pretty much in the central part of the state. We already have one up in Spokane. Then we have, what's this one? If I could please click on it. That would be great. That's the Columbia River, Washington Temple. We've had one in Seattle for a long time. It was the 19th temple of the church. And then it looks like we have one planned for Tacoma, Washington. If any of these are your temple, let me know. Let me know if you've been to these temples or if they are your temple, if you're in that temple district, either in Washington or in Arkansas. And then the third one is in Brazil, and it's in the capital city of Brazil, Brasilia. Let me know if you're in that temple, if you're going to be in that temple district, or if you're going to be attending. If anyone's going to attend any of these dedications, let me know. Put it in the comments. So the interesting thing about the Brasilia temple is that it's going to be in the capital city of Brazil. And the reason why I find that interesting is because we've talked a lot. It's been a long time, but we've talked a lot about the BYU Jerusalem Center. I actually have an entire playlist dedicated to this. There's many people that say, no, this is not going to be a temple. It's never going to be a temple. This cannot be the temple of Jerusalem. And they state all the different reasons. Let me just address them really quick. People will say, no, it was never built to be that, and we have an agreement. Well, true. It was built to be a campus for BYU, but that doesn't mean that it can't change in the future. And there were a lot of miracles that went into constructing this building. There was a lot of opposition. Jeffrey R. Holland said in an article, you can just Google this. Jeffrey R. Holland said that there were 33 miracles that went into making this a reality. It's on Mount Scopus, which is on the same ridge as the Mount of Olives. And as far as it not being in the right place, you don't know. We don't know. How do we know that the plan is that the temple has to be on the Temple Mount? How do you know that? We don't know that. It could be that there's going to be several temples in Jerusalem. Maybe this will be the first one. And then maybe in the millennium, there'll be a temple built on the Temple Mount. But whatever the case, it's a very special building, has a very special history. Many prophets and apostles have been there, and it's a prime piece of real estate in Israel. In fact, why don't we do this? Let's go to BYU Jerusalem Center on Google Earth. If you're not familiar with this area. Okay. So here's the Temple Mount right here. You can see the Dome of the Rock. And then just right over here, you have the BYU Jerusalem Center. Maybe I should turn on, where is it? I think I have the landscape turned off. I don't know how to turn it on. All right, whatever. You can kind of see it here. This is the Kidron Valley. Here's the Mount of Olives across from the Temple Mount, and then the BYU Jerusalem Center. It's just a stone's throw away, right? It's just right there. So we know that in the millennium, there's going to be two world capitals. One of them is going to be Jerusalem. The other one is going to be New Jerusalem, the center place of which is going to be in Jackson County, Missouri. So if I'm right, and by the way, when it comes to we can't use this for other purposes, I've not seen anything that says that. We have a proselyting agreement. We're not supposed to proselyte in Israel. I've looked up the documents. I haven't seen anything whatsoever saying that we can't change this building into anything else. The only thing that the Jews care about is that we don't use it as a proselyting center. If you have documentation, otherwise, send it to me. Otherwise, it's only about proselyting. Okay, so note the architecture. Note that it has this arcade feature, like this row of arches, an arcade. And how, like, when you walk into the arcade, you're still not in the building. You're under, like, the roof, but you're not actually inside the interior of the building, right? Now, let's look at Independence, Missouri, the site of the New Jerusalem. And what do you know? The visitor center has this same type of arcade feature. It even has like the blocky top. We know that this was built to be part of the 24 temple complex. We found that out. I better pull it up. Let's see, past and future of temple lot independence. Hopefully that'll pull it up. Yeah, the past and future of the temple lot. I'm not going to read it again. I've already read it a million times, but I will put this in the description below. It was, in fact, built according to, if I can find it, just find this picture right here, page 179. This was built according to the dimensions that were revealed to Joseph Smith, which you can find in the Joseph Smith papers. It's this right here, 61 feet by 87 feet. It has it's 2 stories high. And they actually, as they were constructing this, they consulted with David O. McKay to determine which of the temples this would be. This is a future temple, and it looks like this, and this looks like this, and this looks like this. Where did it go? This. And this also happens to be a capital city, the capital of Brazil. So I can't say for sure. I'm not going to like say, yeah, it's absolutely going to happen, you know, BYU Jerusalem Center and whatever. I'm just noting some very interesting similarities. But to find out more, go to my playlist called BYU Jerusalem Center. But it's undeniable that this, look at this. It has like the 3 like tiers. You have like the main level, then you have this kind of like second tier right here, or step or whatever. And then a third one. And it's the same thing with the BYU Jerusalem Center. 1, 2, 3. It's uncanny. It's uncanny. Okay, so let's get back to this article. So, okay, while 2 temples have been dedicated on the same day several times, this marks the first time that 3 dedications have been scheduled for the same day, all within 4 hours of each other. The first day of 2 dedications came in 1999, with the double dedications repeated several times the following year. The next and most recent time came more than 2 decades later, less than a year ago, on November 14th, 2021. And 2 same-day dedications are planned for next month as well. So let's take a look at this on my Second Coming spreadsheet. Okay, so you have these 3 right here. Okay, these are the ones that we're talking about. All 3, September 17th. And then next month, we're going to have a double. So 2 on the same day. It's going to be the McAllen, Texas Temple and Feather River, California Temple. Those are going to be on the same day. Now, what's interesting about these 3 is the day on which they're being dedicated. It just so happens that it falls on Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is a 2-day holiday, and this is going to take place on the 2nd day of Rosh Hashanah. Let's go to the Hebrew calendar. Excuse me. So the 2 high holidays are Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. These 2 go together. There's 10 days between them that are called the 10 days of awe. Rosh Hashanah is when they change the date on the Hebrew calendar. It's going to be the year 5784. And what you're supposed to do is, if you're a Jew, for the month before, the month of Elul, right here, you're supposed to be like in a state of like repentance, essentially, thinking about the previous year, you know, and what you need to do to prepare for Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. When Rosh Hashanah comes, they blow the shofar or the trumpets, and it's like a call basically to repentance. And the way that the saying goes is that each year your name is written in one of 2 books, either the book of life or the book of death. And so the goal, obviously, is to have your name written in the book of life. So there's three groups. There are the people that are written in the book of life. There's the people that are written in the book of death. And then there's people that are kind of in between. And so during the 10 days of awe, you're supposed to really focus on, if you're like one of these in-between people, you're supposed to really focus on getting your name in the book of life. So on Rosh Hashanah, your name is written in the book, but on Yom Kippur, the name is sealed. It's like it's a done deal for that year. So these two holidays are really important. And on Rosh Hashanah, the second day, that's when these temples are going to be dedicated. All three of them. First time in church history and potentially the first time in world history. We don't have any accounts of three temples being built and dedicated on the same day in the scriptures. In Israel, in the land of Israel, there was only ever one. At first it was the tabernacle, and that had a few different locations, but that was used until they built Solomon's temple, and then that was destroyed, and then they built the second temple, but there was only ever one over there. While on the other side of the world, in the Americas, we know that the Nephites had temples. I highly doubt that they ever, dedicated three on the same day. And then when it comes to the lost tribes, we don't really know. But let's go to the map here. As you know, I'm not a hidden group person, so I'm going to be saying this from my point of view. Based on everything that I've researched, it would seem that they did leave as a group. They stayed as a group for a long time, primarily in this location. There's, there's linguistic evidence to believe that they came through here between the Black and the Caspian Seas, and then made their way up into Europe. And so while they were still a group together, who knows? They may have had temples. We don't know. We're not going to really know until we have those scriptures. Dallin H. Oaks said in General Conference that one way that can happen is just like the Dead Sea Scrolls. People are always like, well, how are we supposed to get their scriptures and their prophets if they're not still together as a group? And the answer is, the answer is just like the Dead Sea Scrolls. That's what Dallin H. Oaks said in General Conference. It's on my 10 Lost Tribes playlist, on my spreadsheet. And then so is the part about the prophets. I'm not going to go over all that right now. This is not a 10 Lost Tribes video. But anyway, the point is, this is probably the first time in the world's history that three temples have been dedicated on the same day. And it's happening on Rosh Hashanah, no less. So that's very interesting. All right, let's continue. Brasilia, the capital of South America's largest nation, is only 6 decades old after Brazil moved its seat of government and federal district in 1960 to a more central locale in the country's interior. Bentonville, recently named the capital of cool by the Wall Street Journal, is a small Ozarks town having blossomed into a metropolitan area that has everything from corporate headquarters to museums to mountain biking. And Moses Lake has seen its agricultural heritage and 1940s Air Force Base transition to a central Washington city now known as much for manufacturing, technology, and world-class aeronautics. All right. The day's dedications begin with the Brasilia Brazil Temple to be dedicated by Elder Neil L. Anderson. 2 hours later, and nearly 4,700 miles to the northwest, Elder David A. Bednar will dedicate the Bentonville, Arkansas Temple. It will mark the third temple milestone event involving Elder Bednar and this House of the Lord in northwest Arkansas. In November 2020, in the early months of the COVID-19 pandemic, sorry, he presided remotely via video conference over the Bentonville Temple's groundbreaking services. In June of this year, he returned to the temple's media day and started in start of special guest tours. As an apostle, he has also created several stakes that are within the Bentonville Temple District. For Elder Bednar and his wife, Sister Susan Bednar, any trip to Bentonville is truly a homecoming. They and their family lived there for almost 20 years during the 1980s and 1990s, while Elder Bednar taught as a professor of business management at the University of Arkansas, prior to being called as president of Ricks College, now BYU, Idaho. An additional 1,500 miles away to the northwest and 2 hours after the start of the first session in Bentonville, and four after the start in Brasilia, Elder Quentin L. Cook will preside over the dedication of the Moses Lake, Washington Temple. So that's going to be the order of events. And then over here, it goes over the times that we had like 2 dedications on the same day. So April 23rd, 2000, the Memphis, Tennessee, and Reno, Nevada temples were dedicated on the same day. May 21st, it was Nashville and Villahermosa. And then June 4th, 2000, Montreal, Quebec temple and San Jose, Costa Rica temple were dedicated on the same day. And then more recently, it says here, November 20th, 2022, the Belém, Brazil temple and Quito, Ecuador temple were dedicated on the same day. And then the church has 48 additional temples in various stages of construction, with 2 more to start construction following the scheduled groundbreaking services next month. On my map, you'll notice that I only have blue and white place marks. So the ones that are in white, these are temples that are already constructed and in operation. The ones in blue are either under construction or announced. I wasn't going to go through all the effort of like making a third color to separate the under construction and announced, because that would be too much work. So it's just going to be temples that are operational and temples that are not yet fully constructed or dedicated. So it's really interesting. We've noticed this before too. Okay, so before President Nelson's time, okay, look at this column over here at the far right. This is a Wikipedia article that has all the temples, and it shows who dedicated that temple, right? So the first temple that was dedicated under President Nelson's presidency was the Concepcion, Chile temple by President Nelson himself, October 2018. Before that time, if you just kind of like look at the names, with the exception of Elder Bednar, all of these temples have been dedicated by either the president of the church himself or by one of his counselors, with the exception of David A. Bednar that we just saw. And then I think, let me just double check, Daniel H. Wells, he's the one that dedicated the St. George, Utah temple. Second counselor in the first presidency until August 29th. Okay, so yeah, even him, he was in the first presidency. So the first person to dedicate a temple that was not in the first presidency was David A. Bednar during President Monson's time, October 30th, 2016. The Star Valley, Wyoming temple. All these other ones, they're all members of the first presidency until President Nelson. So President Nelson then probably because he knew exactly how things were going to go, that there were going to be all these temples announced. And he can't go around to every single one of them. And who knows what the future has in store, like how many more temples are going to be announced in coming years and then into the millennium. So it would make sense that he'd want to like delegate these future dedications to all the members of the 12, the quorum of the 12 apostles. So it started with Elder Renlin, and then Elder Suarez, and then Elder Bednar again, Anderson, Suarez, Rasband, Gong, President Ballard, Elders Stevenson, Bednar again, Anderson, Renlin, Cook, Christofferson, Oakes, Stevenson, Eyring. In fact, that's interesting because, look, Henry B. Eyring, since President Nelson became president of the church, he has not dedicated a temple. And neither had President Oakes. No, I'm wrong. President Oakes dedicated the second one. But anyway, so that's interesting to take note of, and I presume that moving forward, maybe indefinitely, it's always going to be like that. I think the church is just going to keep growing, and then at some point, in the millennium, it's just going to really, really take off. And I don't know how things are going to be done at that point. If they're still going to have, I don't know. I guess we'll just have to wait and see how things are going to happen. One other thing I wanted to point out really quick. I looked at this list, and there's only 3 temples that have been dedicated on April 6th, which is Christ's birthday. The first one was the St. George, Utah temple, April 6th, 1877. Interesting number. You have the 2 sevens right there, 1877. And then you have the Salt Lake Temple, April 6th, 1893. And then the only other one that was dedicated on April 6th was the Palmyra, New York Temple, which happens to be the 77th temple of the church. That's really interesting. And then, while we're thinking about that, these 3 temples that are going to be dedicated, they're going to be happening on the 17th. And we've talked a lot about 17 and 18. We've talked about the fact that President Nelson is the 17th president of the church, and there have been a whole lot of 17s associated with him. I wish I remember them all, but hold on. Let me pull this up really quick. Let's go to YouTube. Let's see, 17. Here, I'll put these videos in the description below. I have one called 17, more and more 17s. And then another one called From 17 to 18. In fact, I do remember one. When he had announced a total, or like once he reached a total of 300 temples between all that are operating, under construction, and announced, he completed 13 by announcing 17 in that conference, which was very interesting. We've talked about the fact that you have a 7, you have an 8. 7 is a number of perfection and completion, and so is 10. 10 in a mathematical sense, and then 7 in the sense of God creating the earth and the 7 creative periods. And then once you reach 8 is the beginning of a new cycle. And so we've wondered, could it be President Nelson? Maybe he's the last prophet before the second coming. Maybe it's the end, of this dispensation. I don't know. But whatever the case, this is just like another interesting 17 that's happening. 3 temples on the 17th of September, 2023. And then there was one other interesting thing, if I can find it. I thought this was kind of interesting. Back in May, we had the Richmond, Virginia temple that was dedicated, the 177th temple, and it was dedicated on the 7th. of May. So you may find it silly, and that's fine. But the Lord does work through numbers, and there is meaning in things. We may not always recognize it. We may not know until after this life. But I think a lot of these things are very orderly and not as arbitrary as you might think. We're talking about God. He controls everything. He's omnipotent, and he's a God of order. So I don't tend to see things as just arbitrary. But one thing that I think we can say for sure is that these three temples being dedicated at the same time is simply a sign of the number of temples that we have coming that are on the way. There's a whole lot of temples that are under construction and announced. So we've hit a new phase. It's a hastening of the work. Okay. All right, what do I want to do now? All right, let's go ahead and no, I think there may have been a little bit more. No, we finished that. Okay. All right, now on to Israel. So, rare September rainstorm arrives in Israel. Times of Israel. Israel hit by tail end of Storm Daniel after it killed at least 2,000 in Libya. All right, so if you haven't watched my last few videos, let me pull this up. So we've had this this Hurricane Daniel, and actually, I don't know. I was reading. I'm kind of confused. I'll have to double check on it. I'm not sure if it actually got to hurricane strength, but they were calling it a Medicane because of the Mediterranean, and it's like a hurricane, so a Medicane. Anyway, it was a very powerful storm. It started up here, Turkey, Bulgaria, Greece, and then came down here, hit Tunisia, and then mostly Libya. And this is where we have that huge disaster that's taking place right now. The last I checked, the death toll is at 5,100. And then from there, it moved on through like Egypt, and then it hit Israel. Now, I haven't seen or I haven't been able to verify like flash flooding, like what we've seen in Libya or Greece or Bulgaria. We haven't seen that, except for there's been like a video or two that's supposedly from the Gaza Strip that was on X, but I haven't been able to confirm that. But what you see here on Zoom Earth, this is the remnants or the remnant of Storm Daniel, okay, as of the 12th. And so this is how it goes. Let me just kind of skip forward. So you can see it's going over Israel. It's actually over Jerusalem, so Jerusalem received some rain. And then after that, it just kind of dispersed. But, okay, so the yeshiva world, Storm Daniel hits Israel, rain, sinkholes, and a fallen tree in Bnei Barak. And there's the tree right there. There is some damage, some sinkholes. Again, nothing like what we've seen in Greece or Libya or anything like that. The Jerusalem Post, sinkholes gape open across central Israel amid unseasonal rain and weather. But the article that I wanted to read is actually from Israel 365. Blessing or curse, Israel hit by unseasonal rains as Jews prepare for New Year. That's interesting timing. It's interesting timing. Let's go back to the Hebrew calendar. At the time that I'm recording this, it's the 13th. And this storm seems to have hit basically within the last 24 hours. So just a few days before Rosh Hashanah. So let's keep that in mind. I'm going to zoom in. Israel was hit by unseasonal rain on Tuesday evening as the storm system Medicane, dubbed Daniel by a meteorologist, arrived in the Holy Land. The rain continued until Wednesday morning. Medicanes rarely reach hurricane strength and are rare, forming once or twice a year in the Mediterranean. They are most common from September to January. The rare summer storm was a welcome relief as it led to a drop in temperature, ending an extended heat wave. I don't know if there's any, symbolism in that, but we know that Israel's going to be in big trouble just before the second coming, and Christ is going to come and he's going to save them. So I don't know if you can draw a parallel. Anyway, heavy rain is unusual for Israel in the Hebrew month of Elul. And we were just talking about Elul. This year, Elul, the last day of Elul will be on the 15th of September. And it started last month in August. So from August to September. All right. So heavy rain is unusual for Israel in the Hebrew month of Elul. The storm is expected to pass by Thursday. The precipitation led to flash flood warnings in southern and eastern Israel. Sinkholes opened on Eliezer Hufian Street in Holon and Shirat Geolim Street in Herzliya on Wednesday morning. The Israel Meteorological Service, or IMS, warned that flooding could also occur along the central and southern coast, with a slight chance of flash floods in streams in eastern Israel. So, again, I haven't seen anything yet. Let me turn the borders and labels on. So it was just talking about like the central and southern coast, and the southern coast is the Gaza Strip. And someone on X says that they posted some footage that is supposedly from here. Can't verify that at this point, but then it said also flash flooding in eastern Israel. So I don't know if that just means like over here by the Dead Sea, because you have like these mountains right here. And I'm sure that there's like streams and stuff that like whenever it rains that empty into the Dead Sea. I don't know what area it's talking about. I don't know if potentially Jerusalem could see flash flooding. I doubt it, but again, there are mountains over here. I don't know how it's going to work or if anything will happen, but the IMS predicted that 50 to 75 millimeters of rain would fall along the coast. Israel is an arid country with about 70% of the average rain falling between November and March. June through August are often rainless. This is reflected in the daily prayers, in which the prayer for rain is inserted at the end of the what is that word? The autumnal holiday of Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles, and continues until the spring holiday of Passover. So daily prayers for rain between the Feast of Tabernacles and Passover. Again, if we go back to the calendar here, so we have Rosh Hashanah, and then 10 days later is Yom Kippur, and then like a week after that, you have the Feast of Tabernacles. This year it's going to run from the 30th until the 6th. And then you have 2 extra days at the end that are associated with it. But Sukkot 1 through 7 from the 30th to the 6th. Okay, so from this holiday until Passover in the spring, they pray for rain. And they just received some rare rain just within the last 24 hours before Rosh Hashanah. All right. This has its roots in the agricultural basis of the religion, and unseasonal rain can damage crops. The Bible describes the weather. The Bible describes the weather in Israel as a result of the Jews' relationship with God. If then you obey the commandments that I enjoin upon you this day, loving Hashem, or the Lord, your God, and serving him with all your heart and soul, I will grant the rain for your land in season, the early rain and the late. You shall gather in your new grain and wine and oil. Deuteronomy That's from Deuteronomy 11:13 through 14. Connected to rainfall, Judaism has important roots in agriculture, with many religious customs reflect. I can't tell. I feel off this video. I don't know. Okay. Connected to rainfall, Judaism has important roots in agriculture, with many religious customs. I think it's supposed to be reflected. With many religious customs reflect its importance. Okay. Jews begin praying for rain at the end of Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles, and stop asking when Passover arrives, switching to a request for dew. Those who work in the fields know that rain out of season can be destructive, causing grain to rot rather than dry in the sun. Similarly, even in season, too much rain can be bad. The Hebrew month of Elul, preceding the high holidays, is described in Hasidic teachings as a time when, quote, the king goes out of the field to meet with his people, greeting them with kindness and tenderness, displaying a joyous face to all. We, in turn, open our hearts to God. Okay, now that's something that happens every year, the month of Elul. That's when they say that the king is out in the field. And of course, from our point of view, if we were to assign significance to that, it'd be like Christ. Christ is the king. So we only have a couple more days of Elul, and we had this rare rainfall that took place in Israel just a couple days before Rosh Hashanah and at the end of Elul. Don't know if it means anything, but it could. And it's just a few days before these three temples get dedicated on the 17th. Again, I really do think for the first time in world history, 3 being dedicated on the same day. And it's happening on Rosh Hashanah. So, and then let's not forget that next month in October, after the Feast of Tabernacles, on the 14th, that's when we're going to have that eclipse in Utah. Or it's going to go through Utah and other places. But, in fact, I have it right here. So here's the map. Let me make this bigger. So it's going to go through Oregon, Nevada, Utah, New Mexico, Texas, and then Mexico, Belize, a little tiny bit of Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, and then finally Brazil. We've noted some of the interesting cities along this path, like Corpus Christi, which is like the body of Christ. And then over here, it goes through Natal, which is like birth. Or wait, no, let me double check. Natal translated into English. Yeah, of or relating to a person's birth. But how do you say Christmas in Portuguese? Natal. So I don't know. It's interesting. And then let's go to my Google Earth. Excuse me. Close out of this. Let's go over to Utah. Let's turn the temples back on. I did a video about this a while ago where I noticed that the path of totality that goes through Utah, it misses all the temples except for 2. One is the Manti Temple, but it's currently decommissioned. It's under renovation. And then the only other one is the Monticello, Utah temple. So if you're going to draw a line through Utah, that's the width of the path of totality represented by this. So this right here, this is the center line. And then these are the northern extreme and the southern extreme of the path of totality. The path of totality is where where the shadow is going to go over, like in its fullness. Like if you were to experience a full eclipse, you'd have to be within the path of totality as it's happening. So if you were going to draw a line through Utah, the width of the path of totality, and try to miss as many temples as you can, this would be the path, right? Now, I don't know. It's not like I did like a perfect job. I did my best looking at the different maps to try and get this as accurate as possible. But it looks like maybe, just maybe, it could have been shifted down a tiny bit, because here you have the Cedar City temple. So maybe it could have missed Monticello and Manti, even though Manti is currently decommissioned. But the fact remains that it's very odd, I think. You know, the chances are much higher that it would go through one of these other areas, you know, maybe nicking the corner of the state and hitting St. George and Cedar City, or maybe coming up here, you know, hitting the Payson Temple, or, you know, any of these. It's going through a very unlikely area. I don't think that the chances are very good for this to happen, and yet it is. And what's the message in this? I think that there is one. If you're looking at an eclipse as being like a bad thing, like symbolically speaking, it's a when you're in the path of totality, you're in a place of darkness, right? Well, there's not going to be any darkness in Utah where the temples are, right? Now, the same doesn't hold true, for example, for New Mexico. The path of totality is going to go over the Albuquerque temple, and it's going to go over San Antonio. There's the San Antonio temple. But if we're just looking at Utah, I find this highly unusual. And we have to take into account the other two eclipses, the one in 2017, which went over Jackson County, Missouri, as well as Adamond-Iomin. And that was another time where the path had to go in a specific way in order to cover both of those places. And then we have the one coming up next year. I think it's on April 8th, 2024. That's going to go over Palmyra. It's going to go over the Kirtland Temple. Other, you know, these very significant church sites. Now, I know it sounds like it's kind of opposite, because with those two eclipses, they go over significant church sites. But with the one in October that goes over Utah, it misses pretty much all the temples. So I don't know. I'll leave it to you if you think it's significant or not. I think it does. Feel free to put your thoughts in the comments below. But I don't think that we should ignore that. I really don't. I think all three of these eclipses are signs of the times. And then these three temples on Rosh Hashanah, I don't know, but I'm just going to take note of it along with everything else. It's very interesting. And then this storm that hit Israel just before Rosh Hashanah. We're going to have to wait and see, you know, if there is any flash flooding. I'm recording this on Wednesday night, so tomorrow I'll check. Maybe you can check after this video, see if there's been any flash flooding in Israel. If there has been, then I'll add it to the list. You know, let's go over here, turn on 2023. I'll add a place marker right here, and then I'll expand the border of the area affected by Storm Daniel over to Israel. And this will be a bigger area. All right. Well, that's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.